investors, they always want to hear marketplace, and they always want us to say we are Uber for freight. But we're not. We actually said that we don't want to become Uber for freight, because I think a lot of these Uber for freights out there, they're just trying to skip doing the hard part. The hard part is leveling up the industry, because right now we felt like the industry is still kind of lagging behind. A lot of trucking companies are still using pen of papers. A lot of trucking companies are still using TMS that doesn't have API. So we want to fix that first. My name is Alexander Luksidadi. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Rose Rocket.
This is Code Story, the podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries who share in the critical moments of what it takes to change an industry and build and lead a team that has your back. I'm your host, Noah Labhart, and today how Alexander Luksidadi built the TMS system for your business and for everyone in your freight network. All this and more on Code Story. Alexander Luksidadi came to Canada in 2002 as an immigrant with a dream to work for IBM. However, during his time in school, he had a friend that went to San Francisco and came back changed, as Alexander put it. That same friend asked Alexander to join him in his garage and build a startup. He started to create things around analytics and A/B testing and saw the revenue impact of his work. It was at that point that startups became his life. He quickly found out the power of being a developer, but also the need to have a partner on the business side of the journey. Aside from tech, he's a musician. In fact, he got into programming because his dad wouldn't let him become a musician. He decided to do programming because he thought building software was going to be his way back to music. He loves blues, jazz, and recording in his studio. Alexander and his co-founder attempted to build a business in the freight and logistics space, which ultimately failed. But they saw a lot more opportunity in the space and set some goals for themselves to get funding or get into Y Combinator. They started by building strictly broker software. This is the creation story of Rose Rocket.
Rose Rocket is just an operating system for trucking companies. It's pretty much an ERP for logistics service provider, because our customer is not just trucking company, but freight brokerage as well, 3PL, any companies that pretty much need to move freight from A to B. And not just an ERP, but what differentiates us between the other TMS, which is Transportation Management System. What makes us different is we're built for collaborations since early day, because our thesis is trucking companies, the logistics service providers, they have to deal with a lot of collaborations every day. Just for example, say I'm a shipper, I need to move my stuff from, let's say, Toronto to Los Angeles. It's not as simple as calling, say, a trucking company and then, hey, move it from Toronto to Los Angeles. Typically it goes like this. So I'm going to call, let's say, a broker, because that way they can find the right price for me, and they will manage the relationship between the shipper and the trucking companies or the logistics service provider. So the broker will go out there and find a way to move my stuff from Toronto to Los Angeles. And typically it's not just I found a trucking company, or they found a trucking company, and then these trucking company will do the whole thing from Toronto to Los Angeles. The broker will have to break it into multiple different movements. So for example, from Toronto to Chicago, that's one trucking company. Then from Chicago to somewhere, that's another trucking company. And from that somewhere to Los Angeles, that's another trucking company. So imagine having to figure out what's going on during that process. It's very challenging. Typically, say again, I'm the shipper, I call the broker. Yes, let's say I ask, hey, where's my stuff? My colleague in LA just called me, and they said that the stuff is not there yet, and you told me that the stuff is supposed to be there today. And of course, the broker don't know what's going on. They have to call the trucking company, and then the trucking company probably also they don't know what's going on. They have to call the driver, and then the driver might not pick up the phone. 6 hours later, the driver will call back, hey, sorry, my truck broke down. I'm in somewhere right now, right? So You see like how complicated it is now. Just imagine like multiple different layers of these like informations that you need to extract. I was working at Viva Systems when Justin Sky called me. He basically told me, "Hey Alex, I'm starting a new company. I met this gentleman, Justin Bailey. He was a freight broker for 10 years. And I think there's a lot of opportunities here for modernizations." At the time, it wasn't Rose Rocket, the company called FreightNext. It's actually a different company and different product. So we started building software for shippers. So if you look at the equations of the in the freight industry, it's the shipper, there's the middleman, which is the broker, 3PL. There are the service provider, which is trucking companies, and trucking companies itself have many different type of trucking companies. We have a software that aggregates all these prices from all these logistics service providers that we pull from either their API, or a lot of these logistics service providers, they don't even have API. They don't even have software. So what they gave us is like this pricing matrix. And that looks like something like, okay, from A to B, one skid is, I don't know, $20, two skids is $30, and so on, right? So we have to do like manual data entry to put it into the system, and therefore our customer, which is the shipper, can pull all these prices from many different trucking companies, and so on. We figure out that shippers actually thinks that this type of software is just a nice to have software. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to be a system of record, because we think that building a system of record software would be pretty dispensable in terms of the IP, but they don't see it that way. So we had a lot of trouble scaling that business, and eventually the business failed. But at the end of that journey, we saw a lot more opportunities in the space. After FreightNext, that's when we started Rose Rocket. In the beginning, Rose Rocket is strictly just a broker software. At the end of that journey in FreightNext, we connected with a lot of brokers, and they said that we need a better software to manage our operations. And there was this one broker that gave us a check for like $2,000, if I'm not mistaken. Funny enough, that was enough for us to continue building something. We promised ourselves to either get funding or go to Y Combinator. And luckily, we got into Y Combinator, and then it was interesting, because during Y Combinator, we were asked this question: how can you become a billion-dollar company? Because of that, we felt like, okay, let's go back to the drawing room. Is brokers like just having brokers as our customers is enough for us to become a billion-dollar company? And of course, the answer is not that straightforward. We did a lot of research, and we felt like, okay, well, there's a lot of brokers, but there's also a lot of just like one-man brokerage. Because of that exercise, we looked at the other side of the equation, which is the logistics service provider, like trucking companies. And that's when we figure out that, like, holy crap, there are only a few market leader in the TMS space out there, and those are TMW and McLeod. And we felt like, oh, I think like this is it. I think there's something we can exploit here. There's a space, and we should go after the trucking companies as well.
So tell me about the MVP. So you got into Y Combinator, and then you had to build a product, and you had experience building products. So tell me about that MVP you built. How long did it take you to build, and what sort of tools did you use to bring it to life?
Really, in the beginning, it was just order management system. Somebody who's working in the company will be entering the order manually, and another way of ingesting those orders is through our early feature called customer portal. So the idea there is like the brokerage, like they're always busy with all these phone calls, like getting all these deals, closing all these deals, but we want to make it easier for them. So we built customer portal for them so that they can start onboarding their customers and managing it through the portal. That became like one of the most important features that we had, because through that feature, we're able to sell to many different type of companies. Like, for example, the mid-size market, the enterprise as well, because they kind of see the value of having these customer portal. If we think about TMS as a whole, it's not just order management. There's a lot more to it. There's like the planning aspect, dispatching, driver management, driver settlement, like invoicing, billings, and so on. As I said before, it's kind of like an ERP, so it's kind of like a bloated software, and that's probably because like TMW and Cloud has been building like this TMS software category since the 90s, and they keep on putting a lot of stuff in it. We were trying to like be mindful of like, hey, we're early days, we can't just like build all these things. We specifically decided that like we don't want to build another accounting software, even though it is kind of like what's known out there is a TMS should have an accounting software, but we decided not to because there are the best-in-class accounting software out there. Xero, QuickBooks. Why do we have to build another one? So what we do here is just like creating those integrations as connectors or as an apps to enable those type of things.
So in starting at that point, and you kind of alluded to some of this, with any MVP, you've got to make certain decisions and trade-offs, right? About technical debt or feature cut, and you sound like you started in a specific area. Tell me about some of those decisions you had to make and how you specifically coped with them.
That was really the challenge early day, definitely, because there's just so many things to build. Like when we had a call, of course, with like prospect customers, they always like, okay, you guys need this, and just the list keep on getting longer and longer. Trucking companies are not just like trucking companies. There are many different types of trucking companies, LTL, FTLs, and all those things. And they're all doing their business and operations in a very different way. The LTL customers, they're going to ask for this. When we talk to the FTL customer, they're going to ask for that. What changed the game for us is somewhere through that journey, having difficulty of like deciding what's important to build. We came up with a framework, decision-making framework. We call it Placemat. It's kind of hard to like picture what that looks like, but what that tool essentially is to enable us to figure out like where should we be focusing on? Should we be focusing on SMB? Should we be focusing on midsize? Should we be focusing on broker? Should we be focusing on enterprise? There's 4 different dimensions of decision-making framework. When we have to choose, okay, should we do SMB or should we do enterprise? Enterprise, definitely there's a lot of money, but then when you're talking about enterprise, they need a lot of these customizations, custom workflows, and so on. And obviously it's going to be like a mammoth to build all those things. So we decided to go for SMB, and not just because of like the complexity that needs to be done for enterprise, but also the opportunity and the vision as well. Our vision is actually to become the largest trucking company, I guess, to start in North America and then hopefully in the world later on without assets. And what that means is we want a lot of these services, like we want to capture a lot of market share in the TMS space for everybody to use RocheRocket, because if they use RocheRocket, they can collaborate with each other. So this is the differentiator between all the other TMS out there, is like any RocheRocket customers will benefit of having real-time direct integration between another RocheRocket customer. So what we are essentially trying to build is a network. Because if we have the network, then we'll have a lot more things to unlock in the future. For example, marketplace. Because we have visibility of what's going on in the network, we'll be able to start building a real-time marketplace where we can start matching loads between RocheRocket customers or any other systems out there that integrates with RocheRocket. This is interesting because like investors, they always want to hear marketplace, and they always want us to say we are Uber for freight. But we're not. Like we actually said that we don't want to become Uber for freight, because I think a lot of these Uber for freights out there, they're just trying to like skip doing the hard part. The hard part is leveling up the industry, because right now we felt like the industry is still kind of lagging behind. A lot of trucking companies are still using pen of papers. A lot of trucking companies are still using TMS that doesn't have API. A lot of trucking companies are still using this on-prem TMS that's kind of like a walled card. So we want to fix that first, become the system of record, build the network, then we can talk about Uber for freight or any other things.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. and obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors. But they take time and energy pulling you away from building and shipping. And that's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups like yours get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. How, you ask? Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. And the platform connects you with trusted VCSOs to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. Join over 8,000 companies, including many Y Combinator and Techstars startups who trust Vanta. Simplify compliance and get $1,000 off at vanta.com/codestory. That's VANTA.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. Well, then let's talk a little bit about that next step. So building a few things first and then becoming the Uber for freight, right? How did you progress the product? How did you go about that? And, to kind of wrap that in a box, how did you build your roadmap? And what process did you go through, or how did you decide, okay, this is the next most important thing to build?
Early days, you really need to show that numbers, and it's pretty natural that it's all based on the sales calls, what do they need, and then start ranking these features that they need. But when we found out that we're becoming kind of we're always chasing those features, we're always over promising, we always say that to the customer just so that we get that business. We always tell them, oh, okay, you need this feature ABC, that's coming in 6 months. It becomes always kind of chasing all those features just to get sales. And especially early days, we don't have the resource yet, and oftentimes we have to pick the battle. We have to either churn the customers because we can't deliver all the things that we promised, until eventually we need to evolve. And that evolution is we want to empower more autonomy and decision making to the people who work in Drugs Rocket. Not the sales people anymore, not the founders anymore who are driving all these decisions, but we now have a decision making frameworks all based on KPI, all based on what kind of programs we need to build to drive these numbers up. So it becomes more data driven now.
So let's switch to team. So how did you go about building your team, and what did you look for in those people to indicate that they were the winning horses to join you?
So I think one thing that we did pretty well early days is identifying these people. I think it's probably because the founders share the same value. As I said before, myself, Justin Sky, Justin Bailey, we have very high energy and motivation and passion. So naturally, we're looking for the same type of people who have that same level of energy. Luckily as well, I was able to recruit some of the people that I used to work with in the past careers. They're all kind of still here. It's just proof that when you're working with the same type of people that share the same value, it could go a very long way. So what are those values, I guess? So I'm the founders are a very curious person. We like to take risk. At the same time, we take a lot of ownership. Yeah, I think those like core values that we're looking for: passionate people, have drive, have energy, very curious, take risk. And it felt good when you work with these people that share the same value.
Well, let's talk about scalability. So did you build this to scale efficiently from day one, or have you been fighting this as you grow?
I think we're currently at the junction right now where, well, not right now. I think we're starting to chip in like a lot of these technical debts, and some of these inefficiencies that we've been accumulating since early days, because like, of course, early days is all about output. It's all about just moving fast, kind of ignoring a lot of noises. And we learn a lot of things as well, from early days up until today. One of the biggest learning is you need to build a very inclusive culture where it doesn't feel like people just owning a certain part of the stack or certain part of the process. Like what I meant by this is the classic of like, oh, developer, my job is just to write code. Quality, that's QA job. And then after the QA done, they do all the tests. They're gonna pass it to the DevOps team, and then that became their problem. So we learned that probably a couple of years ago that that's not scalable. And as you grow, that won't be really good to keep, because like I mean, like people will be like protecting their turf, people will be like start blaming. And you just need to like react and change before it becomes toxic. So we're starting to adopt like the whole DevOps culture, right? Like trunk-based development and ownership bit from like the beginning of the code until the deployment. A lot of visibilities and a lot of these like new paradigm of like how the developer should think about how they work, how they deploy the code, how they should react to like production incidents and so on. So we're slowly like moving in that directions. And this year actually, we're starting to think doubling down on just getting even better, because I really believe that these companies who are, I would call elite, like the Google, the Netflix, they started investing this very early, and because they started investing very early, they're able to like keep getting better at it. They keep on raising the bar high. Eventually they get to the point where they can start building a lot of innovations, and they can start putting a lot more bets, not just like trying to get the number. It's more about just like, okay, we can cover the base, we can get that number, but then how can we place a bet that will set us apart from like all the other competitions? How can we gain that unparalleled advantage? And if you see like Google, Netflix, and all these elites, like it's gonna be so hard to catch them, because like that's what they do. They keep on building like new innovations, they keep on building tools to enable like that velocity, quality, and then eventually like all these things that sets them apart from all their competitors, right? So that is kind of like what I'm trying to get our company to be.
Well, as you step out on the balcony and you look across all that you've built, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm definitely emphasizing more on the people here. There's something about our culture. We have very low attritions. We've been doing this since 2015. There's only a few who left voluntarily. I think that just shows that we've been building the culture pretty strong, and people are happy. Probably one of the secret sauce for Rose Rocket is we're always trying to find the right home for people. There are like many Rose Rocket employee who started from somewhere, let's say for example marketing, and ended up in like HR or like from sales and becoming product managers. We always like gave that opportunity to people who are curious about reinventing themselves. Yeah, so I think like the culture, the people, definitely are the thing that I'm proud the most.
Well, let's flip the script a little bit. So tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
There's this thing that like we're still kind of like fixing it. It's definitely my mistake. I tried to be fancy with like microservice. This is definitely one of those mistakes that a lot of people probably did when they first tried to do microservice. So I think I tried to do these microservice like early days, and then even though I've been told don't do that early day, you don't know You don't know your problems yet. And I ended up building a distributed monolith, which is the worst of its kind. So we have planned now to like slowly like fixing that, and so that's one. And then second is like that thing that I mentioned before, designing the process in a way that like it's kind of like passing the batons from developers to QA to like the ops, because there's always something missing in between when you're passing the batons. And then when there's something missing, it's gonna be hard to figure out what happened sometimes. And when things broke, then nobody knows like what really happened.
Well, what does the future look like for Rose Rocket, the product, and for your team?
Because we're building a network, we need to cater to all different type of trucking companies and brokers and so on and sizes. And as a result of that, like I think what's next for us is to make our architecture more flexible. So the idea of like building a platform tool and slowly like making our architecture to be more flexible to cater to all these needs from many different trucking companies. So if you think about like how trucking company do their operations, it's basically just a bunch of workflow, even from like the biggest workflow, and then have like a bunch of like child workflow. If you think about it, like say an order, right? An order goes to from Toronto to Los Angeles, that first example that I told you, and that's like maybe the top level workflow, but then like the underneath there are many different sub workflows from like just the movement part. We call it legs. So leg one is this trucking company. That's another workflow to move from B to C. That's another workflow just to make up that like one order. And then on top of that, there are more workflows to be done. Let's say the invoicing, the billings, and then paying, like payment as well is another workflow. So it's just all workflows. So how can we make it flexible? How can we enable customizations to these workflow? I think that's probably like our biggest roadmap this year and next year, before we start unlocking more of the market, like getting more of these different type of trucking companies to become our customer.
Let's switch to you, Alexander. Who influences the way that you work? Name a CEO, a CTO, an architect, really any person that you look up to, and why.
The best manager I've ever had, his name is John Fernandez, and he's actually a director of engineering now in Rose Rocket. He's definitely the best manager I've ever had, and that's why like I worked really hard to get him to join the Rose Rocket. I was so happy that he joined Rose Rocket, so shout out to him if he listened to this. Like a bunch of people at Viva Systems when I worked there, just a bunch of like wonderful, very smart people, just very thoughtful and humble. Sean Marek was my manager. He was like very amazing architect, worked really hard. I just can't beat him because like every time I came to the office, no matter how early I came, he was always there. And then no matter how I tried to be the last person, he just never go home. Other than that, like I like Simon Sinek. I think he influenced me a lot in terms of like leadership style, just being positive, be inspirational. I think if I have to describe my leadership style, is like I like inspiring people. I like playing people motivation into my advantage and driving them for success. Yeah, I think like Simon Sinek definitely influenced me a lot. Yeah, I'll stop right there.
Well, we talked about a mistake, but a little bit different spin. If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently? Or where would you consider taking a different approach?
Somehow, like, I don't know, all these happen like accidental. Because as I said before, like I wanted to become a musician, but then my dad wouldn't allow me, and then I went into this path, and then I wanted to join a big company, and then I met Bob, and then that changed the course of my trajectory. But I don't want to change anything, because like this is really like what gets me wake up in the morning feeling alive, just being in the space, like building things with amazing people. I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for, but I'm really happy like somehow I got here, even though early days I wanted to go somewhere else. Like if I say like I would rather be like I would be a musician instead of all these things. Nah, I don't think so. Yeah, my dad is right. So thank you, Dad, if you listen to this.
Well, last question, Alexander. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world. They can't wait to show it off to you right there on the plane. What advice do you give that person, having gone down this road a bit?
Don't be afraid of failures. The failures is the best thing ever for you if you have the right mindset to see failure as a learning tool, as something that you can get better at. I think that would be the biggest advice. Of course, that's kind of classic, but I just felt like there's a lot of people out there that just afraid of failures. I've came across many entrepreneurs just like they're so afraid of failure. They think too much and they're afraid they're very early in their journey and they already start thinking about like, oh, what if I get sued? What if this and that? Like, dude, just go and build. And I don't know, I mean, like, it will lead you somewhere eventually, and that's what happened, right? With me, it's just, if I just keep on building, it leads me to where I am today. And of course, there's going to be many failures, many lessons, and that's okay. Just keep building.
That's great advice. Well, Alexander, thank you for being on the show today. Thank you for telling the creation story of Rose Rocket.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. Support the show on patreon.com/codestory for just $5 to $10 a month. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
Taxes was waiting around for your taxes to be done, which led to worrying about not getting any money back. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes in a day to get you up to $4,000 fast with a refund advance loan. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Expert filing only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Refund advance has $0 loan fees and 0% APR. Refund advance loans may be issued by First Century Bank, N.A. or Web Bank. Terms apply. Subject to approval.